As if you go in and spring, and I was like, I'm going to go in spring.
I think we'll go ahead and get started. So if you would check and make sure that you have silenced your cell phone or any other devices. And following tonight's poetry reading, our speaker will take some questions, and then you may have noticed we have books for sale outside, which she would be happy to sign for you. So welcome to tonight's second event with Jennifer Michael Hecht, whose visit to Barrie is sponsored by the Constance Wilson Lecture Series, the Interfaith Council, the Department of English, Rhetoric and Writing, and the Department of Religion and Philosophy. If you were at her earlier presentation, you know that Jennifer Michael Hecht is a renowned scholar of intellectual history, the author of the bestseller Doubt, A History, as well as Stay, A History of Suicide and the Arguments Against It, The Happiness Myth, and the End of the Soul, Scientific Modernity, Atheism, and Anthropology. She holds a PhD in the History of Science and European Cultural History from Columbia University and has taught in the MFA program at Columbia in the New School in New York City. A commentator as well as a historian, Hecht has written for such publications as the New York Times, the Washington Post, Politico, Poetry, and the New Yorker. One of her current projects is a book entitled The Wonder Paradox, a guide to using poetry to discover meaning, clarity of mind, and awe. This is a perfect project for Hecht, who is an award-winning poet with 3 collections. Her first book of poems, The Next Ancient World, won 3 national awards, including the Poetry Society of America's First Book Award. Publishers Weekly called her second poetry book Funny, one of the most original and entertaining books of the year. Her most recent book of poems, Who Said, is perhaps paradoxically so, an even more original work for the surprising and generative ways it riffs off of or ventriloquizes or mashes up iconic poems of the past. Her poem, Not Stopping by the Woods on a Snowy Evening, for instance, begins with a phrase from Frost's famous poem, but then takes an immediate swerve into new and unexpected territory. Promises to keep was a lie. He had nothing. Through the woods, over the river, and into the pain. It is an addict's talk of quitting as she's smacking at a vein. In another poem, Hecht puzzles together 2 radically different texts, a Shakespearean sonnet and the Declaration of Independence. Interwoven, the 2 texts spark and meld and become a magically uncanny new thing, whereby the poem's last line, only a single word away from the original sonnet's text, Shakespeare's speaker appears to be Jefferson himself. Then I scorn and change my state with kings. Inviting us into such classic works, ranging from William Blake to Sylvia Plath to Nirvana, not the Buddhist Nirvana, but the 90s grunge band. She invites us into her own poems to play in order to make meaning. Hecht's poems are as playful with sound as they are with collage, creating again and again a remarkable music. Such a poem, which also demonstrates the seamlessness of her academic and creative concerns, is No Hemlock Rock, which begins, "Don't kill yourself, don't kill yourself, don't. Eat a donut, be a blown nut." That is, if you're going to kill yourself, stand on a street corner rhyming seizure with Indonesia and wreck it with racket. To trudge towards a predetermined destination is to seriously circumscribe arrival, and these poems celebrate curiosity, the human joy in puzzle solving. Even the notes, which give the original sources many of the poems riff off of, are given in the form of cryptograms. Without play, there is no discovery, and so no art, no science. Meaning, in its deepest sense, cannot be handed off to you. You must discover it. If these poems speak a hope that doubts as fervently as it believes, the puzzle can be solved not to the poet's intention, but to the reader's. You're right to ask yourself, who said the book begins? Who said is not simply a playful question leading to a trivia game answer. The phrase is an act of defiance that questions received meaning. Who said? Who says? It's a question we should keep asking. In this human experience of the terrifying darkness and the weird interruption that is light, Hecht reminds us the earth is an open, living seed, and so is the mind. Please welcome Jennifer Michael Hecht.
Thanks for coming. Thank you for that beautiful introduction, which was really lovely. It's lovely to see you here, and I'm going to read from a couple of different pieces. Well, I'm going to start with the first book. This is, since we're out of school, this is, please answer all three of the following essay questions. 1, what would it take to make you what you truly want to be? And why will no one cooperate with you on these visions you have of yourself when it would be so easy for them to finally acknowledge that you are the demon ruler of this island world, and that all we eat here is pickled herring that we harvest from the sycamore trees in the plenitude of summer and load into mason jars for the lean months of the cold? Do these men and women, your subjects, fear you more than they love you? And what is it that they fear? Use a logical proof. Show your work. 2, if someone wanted to make you slap them hard, would it be better for him or her to say that your father didn't like to hear you sing? Or to say that your mother purposefully pricked her finger and bled into the coleslaw she brought to the physics department picnic every year because, despite her smile and gala disposition, she had no taste for any of it, not for you, nor for your father, nor for the logic of time and space, and so she made them drink her sorrow with their cabbage. Explain your answer. Are you aware that you cannot save anyone from dying? 3, why do you waste so much time considering the juxtaposition of perceived endlessness of a moment and the micro-elapsement of a year? Clearly there is nothing you can do about it. And yet, overcome with love for your friends and family, you neither run to them constantly and weep for them, kissing their cast-off running shoes like a minor apostle, nor do you refuse to ever again answer the question, how are you? Certain that you don't know what it means. By now you must recognize that rational truth is unbearable and impossible to live by, and that everything possible and bearable is, of necessity, a logical mess, incorporating lies as well as truths. And yet you just go along, making phone calls, hanging curtains, letting the slanting sun before twilight shift your thoughts. Riding the subway, sweeping the hallway, and you watch TV, don't you? Call the cable guy, eat ice cream. Why do you do it when you are so keenly aware of the impossibility of your goals given the obdurate resistance of such materials? Try to answer as completely as possible. Time. This is a villanelle. I think I'll probably read a couple of villanelles. I was at a creative writing class earlier and we talked about villanelles. It's a patterned poem. So it's an A, B, C, and then the lines A and C repeat in the end line of the successive short stanzas. This is a villanelle if you want to be a badass. That's the title. Villanelle, if you want to be a badass. You will not be rewarded for remaining long the same. You will, of course, be taunted if you ever try to change when trainers wander off. Tigers, please do not stay tame. Consistency is worse. It brings the wrong kind of fame. The orbit of right action has a frickin' woolly range. You will not be rewarded for remaining long the same. Inertia, is a pity. Stagnation, is a shame. Yet you yourself preach caution as you pace your unlocked cage. When trainers wander off, please do not. Stay tame. Be a mountain if you want to. Be the whole mountain range. Will you in turn be hostage to your hostage on the page? You will not. Be rewarded for remaining long the same. You can say what you want when the angel makes you lame. You can wrestle against water. You can rape your own rage when trainers wander off. Tigers, please do not stay tame. As hard as bleeding a tree to death by cut and squeezing, change from out of the gut of the rut's range will be insanely hard, but you will not be rewarded for remaining long the same when trainers wander off. Tigers, please do not stay tame. I'm very bossy in my poems sometimes. It's nice. I'm not very bossy in real life. So yeah, you know, as this is probably the closest between a talk about doubt and an hour later a poetry reading. And so it's interesting for me to see how they're related in some ways. And I guess I probably give most of my poetry readings in New York and around New York because I live there. And yeah, you sort of know what people will know, and it's different in another arrangement. I'm switching now to Funny, which is my second book, and in it, all the poems have old jokes in them. They're all clean jokes. Someday I'll write the other volume, but right now, the clean ones, it was funnier. What I discovered is that when you slow down humor, you get philosophy, and when you speed up philosophy, you get a joke. So here is, maybe I'll start with a short one. Yeah, sure. Here's Love Explained. This one has 2 jokes in it. Guy calls the doctor, says the wife's contractions are 5 minutes apart. Doctor says, is this her first child? Guy says, no, it's her husband. I promise to try to remember who I am. Wife gets up on one elbow, says, I wanted to get married. Seemed like a fulfillment of some several things, a thing to be done. Even the diamond ring was something like a quest, a thing they set you out to get, and how insane the quest is. How you have to turn it every way before you can even think to seek it. This metaphysical reframing is, in fact, the quest. Who would have guessed? She sighs, I like the predictability of 2. I like my pleasures fully expected when the expectation of them grows patterned in its steady surprise. I've got my sweet and tumble pat. Here on earth, I like to count upon a thing like that. Thus explained the woman in contractions to her lover, holding on the telephone for the doctor to recover from this strange conversational turn. You say you're whom? It's a pleasure to meet you. She rolls her eyes, but he'd once asked her, am I your first lover? And she'd said, could be, your face looks familiar. It's the same type of generative error. The grammar of the spoken word will flip, let alone the written, until something new is in us and in our conversation. Here's another joke poem. This is a hat trick. It's a little longer, but it's fun. Hat trick. A woman howling. Her baby's bunk somehow afloat in the water, in the river, taking on water. Help, shrieks the mother. Shriek helps the baby, and a good man jumps into the river, splash and paddle, grabs the kid, hands the damp bundle over. Thank God, cries the mother. She cradles her daughter, looks up at the man, says, excuse me, but she had a hat? The child grows up to be a hat check girl, always trying to get back what she'd lost, always having to return it all by the end of the night. She is often sorrowful and ashamed for being sorrowful, surrounded by warm coats, a stool to rest on while others elsewhere spend all day bending. Wincing anyway, she sharp regrets her bland missteps, laments her ill use and fatigue. It's awful. her feet hot with it, her head metal cold. You think it's enough to just keep getting old? Can't I also have my hat? Roots squeeze this information towards their leaves. You cannot also have your hat. After mother and child left, the man loitering the scene of his heroics happened upon the little girl's cap, picked it up off the bank, startled at the scale of its protection, took it home, kept it for years, and lost track of it. It's been long seasons since he'd jump in the sea like a fin in response to a splash, to be so little thanked, so asked for more, flattened in him what he had hoped to give. The mother grows less certain by degrees that all she had long awaited had any sense outside the confines of her blazing expectations. That's about my mother. The girl, fidgeting, hair clip in cloakroom, her own self set by his one leap and her many lurid resignations, braces waves of distress and lets down her tresses. All three rail their separate saga, he having labored and netted so little, the elder she having wanted so much from those around her and found she was not so much let down as skewed in her detailed attentions. The girl wrestling a dreadful shadow, the facts that throw us in the water in the first place ruin us for much saving. She is aggrieved of it, feels disgraced by the triumph of pain. I want to comfort them, myself, my keen regret, but am at best a lemon tree, vivid fruit abundant among bleak green leaves. I will wait for ice and sugar to be invented, bees in the daytime, bats when it's done. I will wait in the sun. I hope for relief like a lunatic, indulge like a drunk in my croon. It is my intention to offer lemonade while there is time and so much brutal sunshine. Meanwhile, I gather hero and mother in my bower. As for the girl, she's not a hat checker anymore. There's no such thing these days. After an eon of servitude, men stopped wearing hats, so she was free to wander away from the 21 Club and under my branches. Isn't she beautiful? Didn't she have a hat? To know and arrange and recover even that, I am ridiculous, but it is what is wanted. I think I'll save the last joke poem I chose for you. Let's see. I think I'm going to jump ahead to a new poem from the new manuscript. It's called Waking Greenwood Cemetery, this poem. Greenwood Cemetery is a very big old cemetery in Brooklyn. It's beautiful and strange. 30 years ago in the woods, I photographed a deer corpse at my feet, her face barely changed by death. But all the rest of her was bare spine, clean bones curving up behind her in black and white on photographic film. Here on poured stone city floor, little bird corpses visit for a day, maybe 3, and vanish long before they dwindle to bone. 30 years ago in the East Village, there was a dead rat on the sidewalk at 9th Street, just off First Avenue. Rat was there the next day and the next, then it was gone, and someone chalked, "Who stole my pet dead rat?" Memory makes a cemetery of any landscape. Done, sermonized, do not ask your iPhone which way to Greenwood. Focus up. We're in Greenwood now. That one is, well, for one thing, the rat story's true. It was so long ago, I was working at the Strand, I was between graduate school, and indeed, New York City can be, but usually they clear off the carrion. And in fact, someone did write that message. And yes, there is much about the city that makes you actually forget about what's going on there because it cleans itself up. This is a poem called, also in the new manuscript, it's called We Change Our Minds About Them When They Die. I wrote it, I guess after the actor Philip Seymour Hoffman passed away. He's an actor I had always sought out to watch. I found him riveting and exciting, but I also thought he made choices sometimes that felt self-important, and so I couldn't guarantee it was going to be entertaining. Some of the things were going to be a little ponderous. He would err on that side. Anyway, I guess there's that moment where someone disappears from the world, someone dies, and somehow we recalibrate. And that's what this poem's about. We change our minds about them when they die. When they die, we change our minds about them. While they live, we see the plenty hard they're trying to be a star, or nice, or wise, and so we do not quite believe them. When they die, suddenly they are what they claimed. Turns out, that's what one of those looks like. The Cold War of manner, of manly, or mission is gone. Same person, same facts and acts, just now a quiet brainstem. We no longer begrudge his or her stupid luck. We change our minds about them when they die. I will try to believe while you yet live. I wrote it very much for that person, and yet, as people have passed on since I wrote it, I find it happens again and again, that once they're no longer competing with us, maybe, somehow we're able to sort of let them be what they said they were, or what they were trying to be, or what they were scared they weren't. Okay. This is on the cultivation of a garden. Yes, and this was one that was, I made up the people in this poem, but when I published it, it was fact-checked to hilarity. On the cultivation of a garden, that, quote, man is the only animal who talks to plants, unquote, was first asserted in the 1810 Principia of the Baron von Inger Stowe. Stowe surmised we'd talk to anything. The assessment was finally put to rest in 1907 when Kensington observed a solo jackal cackling to a yellow jonquil. I talk to plants in my back garden. Who are you? I'll ask a weird weed, sensing snaps as I break its every tendril. Hello, here's death. Man is a chatty Cathy. Today we know man is the only animal who hopes plants would grow better exposed to his chatter. I mean, sad, really. To what other beast would that ever occur? This rubric for differentiating our species, man is what needs to be heard, known, was discovered oddly by Kensington's widow, who awakened from a laudanum dream to find she'd stitched it in matte eggshell on a sheet white linen sampler. It's harder to say than I realized. Yeah, so I made those people up. There's lots of people in history who have written a Principia, and you can make one up too. I'm going to read a couple of poems from Who Said, one which Sandy introduced and inspired me to read it. This is Not Stopping by the Woods on a Snowy Evening, one of the lesser cryptic ones. That is, I expected everyone to be able to guess the poem. 1. Promises to keep was a lie. He had nothing. Through the woods, over the river and into the pain. It's an addict talk of quitting as she's smacking at a vein. He was always going into the woods. It was he who wrote, "The best way out is always through." You'd think a shrink, but no, a poet. He saw the woods and knew. The forest is the one that holds promises. The woods are lovely, dark, and deep. They fill with a quiet snow. Miles are traveled as we sleep. He steers his horse off the road. Among the trees now, the blizzard is a dusting. Holes in the canopy make columns of snowstorm lit from above. His little horse thinks it is queer. They go deeper. Sky gets darker. It's the darkest night of the year. 2. He had no promises to keep, nothing pending. Had no bed to head to, measurably away in miles. He was a freak like me, monster of the dawn. Whose woods these are, I think I know. His house is in the village, though. In the middle of my life. In the middle of life, he found himself lost in a dark woods. I discovered myself in a somber forest. In between my breasts and breath, I got lost. The woods are lovely, dark and deep, but I've got promises to keep, smiles to go before I leap. I'm going into the woods. They're lovely, dark and deep, which is what I want. Deep, lovely darkness. No one has asked, let alone taken, a promise of me. No one will notice if I choose bed or rug, couch or forest deep. Doesn't matter where I sleep. Doesn't matter where I sleep. That's an interesting poem, which, because I know I have some poets here, I'll tell you. I tell my secrets in the poem, and I also tell secrets that aren't mine. And people tell me sometimes how brave it was for me to tell a secret, and sometimes that's not my secret. For instance, the addict smacking at a vein. There was one review that covered the whole book as if I was a junkie recovering. I've never, but that one I'll deny. But there are other ones that people will say that it meant a lot to them, that I suggested, that I did things that some people find very problematic. Anyone would find a big thing to go through, and I don't deny it. I just say thank you. The thing is, if you tell enough secrets, there's more than could be possibly just about you. So swamp them, like the lawyers do. Just swamp them with secrets, and that way you can tell yours. And the whole poem will be good only because you told yours. Yours will somehow make the poem alive, but no one else has to know which one. Yeah? It really works. I don't know why. Do you know those Cornell boxes? That artist, Joseph Cornell, made these gorgeous boxes, and you look at them and you think, okay, so I paint one color background and I find an image and I reproduce it a couple times, then I put a marble and a fake bird in and I've got one. Except how come we can't? And the answer is you actually have to care about the items. Otherwise you could just go to any junk shop and buy a bunch of items and put them in a vitrine. I know I'm talking crazy now, but it's poetry reading time, so I'm allowed. And I'm just trying to say that you can't just put some stuff that looks cool in a vitrine. It won't move people. It moves people when you actually go to your grandmother's grave and take that dirt and put it in. I don't know why, but because it's real, you won't overcrowd that vitrine. Because it's real. Because that dirt matters, you won't crowd it. And other people will sense the meaning. But you have to use some real stuff. This is Split, a alternative theory of human psychology. Split. We speak of rebellion when the kid is a hellion and the folks are as mild as a spoon. Likewise, Republicans born of free-thinking lesbians feel like reactors, turncoats on how they were raised. Let me offer another concatenation of this explanation. Think of your mother as one discrete corner of a person with a multiple mental disorder. You're one of the others, one that split off, not a turncoat then, but the expression of what was suppressed. This same woman, your mother, who wants to help others, also likes life as a racket where the best finagler wins. For reasons we do not fully assemble, she cannot voice this redder side of her nature, and the voicing of it, that is you. You are not teaching the former generation. Their frenzied distaste in certain directions was the cue you used to decipher the code of just how you were not to do as you were being told. A lot of these, how can you... The thing with poetry is I don't worry about coming up with the idea first, ever. If I have an idea first, it doesn't work. That idea only gets me to the idea that it just has to be fresh somehow. It doesn't work. So it has to be personal. It has to be with that one, it's definitely true that, my parents gave me certain things that they believed in, but the amount that they were exercised about certain things sort of is why, with hindsight, I can look back and say that's where I gravitated, maybe when I was being rebellious or just because I was curious, so that there's a whole world, and we either do what they say or we directly don't do what they say, but they still are pretty much determining. It's not all those other aspects, and that's where split came in. Funny thing is, my mother loves it and has it hanging in her office. Who knows? I think, I had a request, and I'm going to hit that one. This is a very short poem called On the Strength of All Conviction and the Stamina of Love. It's in 4 tiny little stanzas, each one built slightly like a pyramid. Sometimes I think we could have gone on, all of us, trying forever. But they didn't fill the desert with pyramids. They just built some. Some. They're not still out there building them now. Everyone, everywhere, gets up and goes home. Yet we must not diabolize time, right? We must not curse the passage of time. Let's see. Well, this is a poem that's in the new manuscript, but it's similar to Who Said poems. It's called Conversation in a Cafe Near the Corner. It's a rewrite of a single Shakespearean sonnet, but I've turned it into a conversation. So the alternate lines are being spoken by 2 women sitting at a cafe, and one of them is very upset with her husband. Conversation in a cafe near the corner. What happened? Let me not. The marriage of true minds admits impediments, true, and love is not love. What alters? When does alteration find? I bend with the remover. To remove? Oh no. It is a never inked-in mark. Look, in the tempest, I am not shaken. I want to be a star like every other dog and bark. Their worth's unknown. Your height's been taken. Love's not time's fool, as long as at the end you only count the love that still has traces. It's true, love alters a lot, even in hours and weeks, but it returns at night to embrace at the edge of doom. I suppose you're right. If not, I never said all the above, and no one yet has ever lived in love. That might be depressing to you young people, but married love's kind of a haul. Kind of a haul. And yeah, that poem also, the Shakespearean poem, it's so gorgeous, and it says this amazing thing at the end that if it's not true, I never wrote this. And he did write it, so it's true. Except, upon me proved, and then that's rhymed with loved, which isn't pronounced louved. And so the rhyme is gone because of the Old English. So that's why I had to rewrite. I'm going to read you a couple more and then we can go on. Let's see. There's a poem that was in the book that the creative writing class here read that I gave a kind of new right to, and it's considerably shorter now. I wasn't sure whether to read it to you, as you can see by the fact that I'm searching for it now. I think I'll read you this one instead. This is also in the new manuscript, but also reminds of another poem, the Emily Dickinson poem. It's famous enough. Hope is the thing with feathers. You recognize it? This is called Hope is a Raptor with Talons that won't leave me alone. I am the thing with poems, I perch upon the soul. I am the thing with derision, with vision, whose perch can take a toll. But you are the thing that sings a tune, never stops at all, even though I ask very directly at least once a year. Hope is a raptor with feathers, reputed to be wise, but every night is out tearing off strips of mice and turning its head past the side like a lunatic, eyes wide for danger, moon white as they hazard the moon. Need is a thing with fur that bashes against the cage and screams the tune without the words and stops. Hope is a dinosaur's daughter, a rover in a cage, dreams of an eaten seed, an owl, a fluffball relic of the lizard age. On our nocturne guided walk in old-growth forest in Oregon, we stalked an owl pair but never saw them. Under the influence of the forest, I encountered their absent version. Invisible, incorporeal, it was easy to get them past airport security. Now they haunt me with their adamant hope in New York City above the craggy horizon. Let's see, I'm going to give you 2 more short poems. Let's see. Well, here's a medium and then a short one. This is called Steady Steady. I believe you can build a boat. I believe you can get to water. I do not believe you can get the boat on water. How do other people bear what you are still afraid of? The answer is that when big things happen, you do go through the looking glass, but it is still you who goes through. The inner text is all still right to left, so you just keep reading. Because there is no boat and there is no water. I stare at my tiny baby's face, but he wriggles so he can't quite be seen. He grows steadier, more the blur is gone, joins us in the myth of the stable. Of the quakiness of infancy and old age, we shimmer and shimmy into being and out again. In the meantime, we're horses in the stable of the myth. A quick check of any ocean or any fire is a reminder of how things seem. I can't seem to see them. You're on the beach and you find out the Secretary of Defense thinks calico cats are the agent of the devil. Your friend asks if they get 10%. She was funny, your friend. The water in this metaphor is unreal because of the way time passes. So you can't quite get the boat on water, but you can build the boat. And a boat is good for a lot of things, not just on water. Will we, without the boat on water, always feel that we are missing something basic to the picture? No. That's what I'm trying to say. It's important to let sense quiver, even in this stable of the myth of the stable, even living aboard a boat, mired in mud, in view of the sea. Who wants yet another world? It's enough already. And I will end, but I will take questions, but I'll end with a little poem from my first book called History. Even Eve, the only soul in all of time to never have to wait for love, must have leaned some sleepless nights alone against the garden wall and wailed, cold, stupefied, and wild, and wished to trade in all of Eden to have but been a child. In fact, I gather that is why she leapt and fell from grace, that she might have a story of herself to tell in some other place. Thanks. We do questions? Something like that? Yeah.
I'm just fascinated how you mix all this. I mean, you know, doubt, suicide, the poetry. So, when you thought of the suicide book, did it consume you, or were you able to set it aside and do it?
One of the poems I flagged that I didn't read is the No Hemlock Rock, but Sandy read some of it. I have had, I've never been a person who had a serious recurring depression, but I have had what just shy of that, as most of us have had. Times where things look really dark and you can't see out of them. And I was actually coming out of really one of the first, well, this postpartum involved is hard. And I was starting to feel better. And I got a phone call saying that an old friend of mine had taken her life. And yeah, a lot of us were devastated. A lot of us who hadn't even seen her in a long time. And she had been up at Columbia when I was up there. We were both getting our PhDs, but in different departments, but poetry had brought us together. And in response to this, I wrote a poem. I would have never written what I wrote in prose. It was kind of insane. For one thing, having written Doubt, I became a kind of minor famous atheist, and the secular atheist position on suicide is, hey, it's your body, God doesn't care, there is no God, so do what you want. And so I don't think I've ever started typing these ideas, except that poetry, I don't ask myself what I'm saying first, I just say it. And I actually read, which took me a while to remember, but I ended up writing a poem about that too. There's a poem written by a wonderful Brazilian poet named Drummond. I won't risk in any case. He has, in his poem, he says, don't kill yourself, don't kill yourself. But what he talks about is clearly not telling people not to kill themselves. He's saying, his poem is that he's been kissed. And he hadn't been kissed in a long time, and he's a young man, and he just feels like he's going to somehow die before he gets kissed again. And he's telling himself, I'm walking down the street, the trees aren't looking at me, all I have to do is not kill myself, and I might get kissed again. It really isn't at all about don't kill yourself. But I wanted it to have been. And the poem came out of that, and the first thing I thought of to tell someone so depressed they were thinking of killing themselves is to go on a street corner and rhyme seizure with Indonesia, because what I was saying was, how about, what if it's okay to just say, what if it's okay if my friends and my family and everybody finds out that I've gone crazy? What if it turns out this world is stupid and I won't play? And I was able to play up until today, and I can't anymore. Couldn't that be okay? I mean, I hadn't thought of this phrase yet. This one took years, but if you feel like your society is telling you that you don't matter, maybe a better rebellion is to live. Maybe screw them. And maybe we have to practice thinking about that and not be so alone. And so the poem says, like, maybe we're not going to be okay, but not that. And I say in the poem, if you shoot yourself, it cracks the biodome. If you poison yourself, it poisons the well. I didn't know that for sure. It just felt that way. People responded to the poem. And then when a mutual friend of ours, another woman, another poet, we'd been up at Columbia together, she also had a PhD. She was also a very accomplished poet. And she did it too. On Christmas, a year and a half after the first one. And in that moment, I already had the poem. I'd already shown it to a lot of people. People asked me for copies whenever I read it. And so I didn't post the poem, but I posted this blog post to the Best American Poetry. I mean, there's no editor there. I didn't have to pass it to anyone. I just posted it saying, I can't get her back, but you're out there still. Someone is reading this who's on the edge. I can't catch them anymore, but I need to catch you, and I need you to catch me. And let's save each other. Let's stop this. Let's admit how much pain we're in sometimes. And I also said things that, because I was a historian, I had a sense of. I had a sense that the church, for some reason, had gone too far in being critical about suicide. It had tortured corpses and take over the whole estate so your family would be destitute. It worked a little bit. And I think for the good. Many suicides are impulsive. If you can get past that bad moment, you really are more likely to be okay than not, by far. once I looked up the statistics, it took me a year just looking through this wealth of information that we have. And so really, I'm really only arguing against impulsive suicide. What I'm arguing is, if you could find one person who thinks you are in either mental or physical shape that is so bad, with such a bad prognosis, if you find one doctor or family member or friend who feels that way, you're in a slightly different category and will be separately adjudicated. I'm talking to all the people who have been alone, usually with a little drugs or alcohol involved, and you know you're outrunning even your own best self. I'm just saying, don't let your worst mood kill all your others. I'm saying have just a little respect for yourself in 10 years. Think about who you were 10 years ago. You're going to know that much more, especially if you're under 25. I know it's a little rude to mention, but your prefrontal cortex isn't finished. And it finishes at 25, and you will be able to command the world in ways you can't before you're 25. You're able to hold inhibitions. You're able to wait for rewards better. You gotta wait. But the truth is, older people too, I hear from it all the time. They hit a bad, bad patch, and 10 years later, oh boy, are they glad they didn't succumb. And the big difference tends to be whether there's means anywhere around. So if you're in trouble, keep the guns out of the house. In England, in the 90s, they'd shown a television program where somebody took a lot of Tylenol, and it's a terrible way to kill yourself. Agony. But people were doing it. So they changed the amount of Tylenol they sell in a package. All you have to do is buy 2 packages, but people don't tend to. And they don't, what I was about to say was they don't tend to leave the house to go do it. What they tend to do is they have one idea. And if they meet even one person or a fence, they usually go home. They don't go find another bridge. There's a famous suicide bridge, you put up a fence, they don't go to the next bridge, they go home. And there's tremendous evidence that even people who do jump, when they survive, the second they jump, they say, the only problem I cannot cure in my life is that I just jumped. They know. And, you know, we have all sorts of sociological studies that show get through that first. If it's terrible humiliation, you may have to get through 3 months of feeling shame, but then it passes. But if it's a bad day, don't let it be one bad day. Write yourself notes. Say, I am happy now in your own handwriting, so you'll believe it. Emerson says our moods do not believe in each other. It's true, especially depression. That one's a liar. You gotta outrun that one. You gotta just set yourself a few little sights. And we all know murder is wrong, but we all sometimes want to kill the person who just cut us off on the road, right? But we don't even consider it. It really is true that a conceptual barrier can work. When you're okay, you can say to yourself, I don't want to die that way, and I'm not going to let a bad voice in my head outrun the rest of me. I'm going to at least put up a few little fences so that even if you have to talk to one person to get your guns back, by the time you talk to them, there's a really good chance you're going to feel better. So put one person at least between you and means, because when they stopped selling the Tylenol like that, the suicide rate dropped. The real suicide rate dropped. They didn't find other means. And that's why men are so much more successful with suicide. Successful is a bad word. Why they complete more often, because they have more access to guns. But slow the thing down, and most of us find hope. So I'm sorry, I wandered off because I'm talking to young people, and your guys are the ones that I most want you to know. It is irrational, but you are very, very loved by people who know you, people who only know you a tiny bit. Just try to remember to trust that love. Sometimes other people know how great you are and you don't, right? Sometimes you need to trust that other people know those things. There's a lot of stuff in life that sometimes when you're drowning, just go with where the rest of the people are going. You know the difference between I'm not talking about some fad, but take care of the people around you. Do the things that we know. And trust that people love you. But trust that for some weird reason I love you. And I want you to stay with us and come say sad things to me, and I'll say sad things to you, and we'll have a beverage. So when I then had, the truth is, no, I could have not written Stay. In fact, it was almost too hard to do, and nobody wanted to publish it. It was too scary. They loved it in a way. They would tell me they loved it. They would hug me. They didn't want to publish it. And agents also hugged me and said no. And I, frankly, was having a hard time getting anything off the ground. And it was right after the economy had crashed. Publishers were looking me in the eye and saying, we really only want to publish people who've been on TV. And I couldn't really blame them, because when I need a quick read, I grab Tina Fey too. Like, I get it. And they needed to make money, and I felt like I didn't know what to do. And I kept proposing things, and they kept saying, and I would change it to try to get them to say yes. But with this one, they would say, and I would say, no, this one. And they would say, well, how about you change it like this? And I'd say, no, this. It was me being sure. It was me being sure. But if I could have done anything else, I probably would have. It was hard. I read so much about suicide for a whole year. It was really hard. And I also had to figure it out. Like, what was I really saying to people? But the more I thought about it, the more I felt, the more I realized how much other people meant to me, and how suddenly obvious that became when they left voluntarily. The more I realized I must mean that to other people, and it made me happier. Not under the responsibility of it, I felt happier. When you realize that when people take their lives, they very often, that is, if one person does it in a school, it's very likely that the rate will go up in that school. It doesn't always happen, and you can work against it. But, and it follows age and gender and anything that you think is like. So when postmen start doing it, other postmen think, oh, is that what postmen do? It's sad, but if you look it up, you'll see farmers will do it in waves for periods of time, and then it kind of goes out of the vision, and those next people survive their depressions, you know? So it seemed to me that the last thing I wanted to do was to make people feel a burden. So I didn't want to say, if you take your life, you're threatening other people's lives, though that is true. What I wanted to say instead was, if you stay through your dark night of the soul, other people will. You're saving people's lives just by sitting and crying at the edge of your bed, but not killing yourself. You are saving people's lives. You are a hero. And I thank you. I thank you. I thank you for some other mother's son who you are saving by getting through your hard time. You know, I wrote this, and when I saw that a suicide rate in a family skyrockets for 2 generations, and if there's another one, it just keeps going. All the details are there, and you can see they are very careful social scientists. They take out for depression. They take out for... But the flip side is the side that I want us to understand, that we do this gift for other people. And we see over and over that when you feel like you're contributing, you do feel better about yourself. And what I want to be visible is that just by staying, you are doing something tremendous. And you don't get to know who you save. And I said in the book, you know, if you make it through your dark night of the soul, your niece will make it through hers, because unborn people at the time, people who haven't been born yet, will be affected, because they will know, oh, my aunt did. And an ex-Army Ranger wrote an article for the Daily Beast saying that he'd read it. And he actually hadn't even read it. He'd read a David Brooks sum up. David Brooks, for some reason, he liked my book, and he wrote a very positive column about it. And this Army Ranger read it, and it had lots of chunks, including if you make it through your dark night of the soul, then your niece will. And he said that he watched two ex-Army Rangers had taken their lives. And he was so depressed about it. He felt he should have saved them. It was all he could think of. And while he was trying to figure out what to do about it, a third one did. And that's when he happened to find this writing. And so he wrote in the Daily Beast, if I want the next ex-Army Ranger to make it through his dark night of the soul, I guess I have to make it through mine. I guess I have to take the help people are offering me. That was a case where people were offering help, and he was thinking other people need it more. But this little line convinced him they need me to survive. And I need to take care of myself in order to survive, because I'm not always in control. So I have to go get help so that I will. And that, when you start to see that, it's, boy, it helps me with a lot of regret, because I can say to myself, I would, why did I, and then I realized, well, I wrote Stay After, and if I hadn't been in that tight place, I wouldn't have written it, and somebody's alive, at least somebody, because I get letters all the time. And of course, some of them maybe it's not, but, and then there you are, it comes around, and then it's beautiful. But how was it in the beginning? I felt kind of all on my own, and I don't think I could have done it if I had any other way to go forward. But that's life. So, any others? Sure.
A completely different direction, but thank you for that. I want to ask about the formal element of your composition.
Yeah.
I'm listening to you read. I'm hearing a fairly regular, sort of regular running verse, and the rhymes are falling. Then I open your book and I see the way in which you arranged your lines, and they're nothing like I imagined when I'm listening.
Right.
Now, I've just been looking at your poems here, so I don't understand what
Yeah.
you're doing, but I see that there's a complexity in which the oral and the written seem to have a kind of a tension going on.
Yes.
Could you maybe elaborate on that?
Yeah, for sure. Thanks. I find when I go to poetry readings, a lot of the readings I go to, the poems sound funny, and then when I go home and read them on the page, I'm saying other people's poems. Poets, we want to entertain, and so we hit the funny lines and we lighten up in some ways. So I think that that's kind of a general thing. I see that a lot of times. With the rhymes, I was just talking to a creative writing class, and I said, hey, if you want to rhyme but it feels too false or old-fashioned, just tuck the rhymes inside the line. And I was being a little facetious. I certainly never decided to do that, but that is what I do. I enjoy rhyme. I don't want it to fall unnaturally on the modern ear. And I find if I hide them, if I every once in a while seem like I'm about to give the rhyme, but then I don't, and then I put it in later, if I use 2 half rhymes instead of 1 whole rhyme, like all these ways that I get what I fell in love with poetry with the most jangly romantics, like most kids. I mean, I knew Kubla Khan, I knew that when I was a kid. All the rhymey stuff, Jabberwocky and all the most eerie Shakespearean stuff, and kids love that stuff. It's got appeals that are a lot like pop songs, but more complex and more dense and more rich. I love rhyme, and the first rhyme I loved was rhyme that didn't have that much intensity of meaning in some ways. Keats is just a lot deeper. He does the same amount of crazy rhyme as Poe, but Poe's are just simpler and easier, and it's usually the same message about longing and death and beauty, whereas Keats says everything there is to be said, also rhyming all over the place, but somehow subtler. Dickinson rhymes all over the place, but she's sneaky as heck about it, and I try to be sneaky too, because I guess I like it better. But I do also like some rhymes to clang together. In that history poem, the one I ended on, the rhyme is really only in the last 2. I mean, there's only clear certain rhyme at the end, but it almost tricks you because it's short. By the end you think, was it all rhyme? So yeah, the formal aspects are, if you write poetry, try all of them because it's fun, and because the people who put together the formal aspects put them together because they work, or that is, they lasted because they work. And, the villanelle is one of my favorites because it has repetition. I love a chorus in a good song. I want to hear that repeated, but in a new way. Life feels like that to me. Also feels good when I'm listening to hear repetition. I like repetition. It's really hard. It's as hard as rhyme to not get wrong, but I like it a lot. But with free verse, you know, I would never abandon free verse. You're allowed to actually just say whatever you're feeling and cross off anything that feels like it's, you know, not helping. But I guess also when I'm giving readings, I feel like rhyme is sometimes easy to hear. I don't know. But yeah, I love, you know, sonnets. We know they're 14 lines. We know they're sort of short and like a little box. But only if you've taken a poetry class do you know that there's usually a turn. The last 2 lines tell you that everything I've said up till now is not quite true. That's part of how a sonnet's supposed to work. You don't have to do it. And all these forms you can mess with. That's part of the game. It's part of the rules. Mess as much as you want. But the fact that I have a 14-line idea where I'm supposed to write into something and at the very end switch, you know, that it's already a framework for an introspective, nuanced, problematic thing to say, and it's already there for you. You know, it tells you where to rhyme and when to, you know you finished the poem because you built up an argument, found a weakness, switched it, and felt something bloom. You know, so yeah, they can be great help, but the big thing is. Everyone will tell you, if you want to be a poet, read. And I second it 1,000 times, but I think the most important thing is just keep asking yourself, is this true? Say something, and as long, if you just say, I'm making this up, say something else. Try to find something that you say, yeah, that's true. You don't have to show it to anybody. That's the crazy thing about poems. You can fill your drawer with them, and years later when it's no longer true about you, you can show people the poems. You can rewrite them. I mean, a sculptor, boy, you make one, you decide you want to change the face, you're done, right? But with poetry, you really can try it with rhyme, without rhyme, with the formal aspect, without. You can publish both. You can publish them opposite each other. There's a tremendous amount of freedom nowadays, but make use of all the great wisdom that we can build on, because why reinvent it all? You know? Any last thoughts? Yes.
All right, we have a tradition at these readings that started when Jericho Brown came in last year.
Love Jericho Brown.
Awesome guy. So the question is, what are your opinions on Beyonce?
Yes. Well, I have opinions about Beyonce. I certainly love Beyonce. Something just came into my mind and flitted out. Rihanna, that's what came into my mind. I just love her so much. As a sort of pop singer person, she's the one that I feel like when I need something, sometimes I will go put on YouTube and I will watch her just tell the world, you know, she's just such a badass. And she'll say, like, maybe I'll get arrested tonight. I don't care. She looks real beautiful at the screen and just tells you whatever. There's something about that one I love. But I don't listen to too much. If I don't go into a store, I don't drive anymore. When do I hear the radio? It's tricky. My kids are just starting to listen to music, and so but mostly I'm learning all about YouTube comment players. You guys watch these? You guys watch people play video games?
Oh,
Yeah.
the
If I didn't have kids, I would not know that this form of entertainment exists. Do you older people understand that the young people are not watching shows anymore? They're watching young men and women play video games and narrate what they're doing, and it's funny. I sit there with my kids. I get it. I like Markiplier better than I like Cutie Pie. People know what I'm talking about. On that I end. There we go. Keep asking questions is the answer. Thanks, guys.
I was expecting that. Love it, love it, love it, love it.